The world held its breath. For years, Europe had lived under the shadow of Nazi Germany. One nation after another had fallen beneath Hitler's relentless war machine. Poland, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, France. By 1944, nearly all of Western Europe was under German occupation. Across the English Channel, millions waited for the day freedom would return. No one knew exactly when that day would come. Behind closed doors, in secret military headquarters hidden across Britain, Allied commanders worked around the clock on a plan so massive, so dangerous, that failure could change the course of history forever. This operation would become known by a single name: Operation Overlord. It would be the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. More than 150,000 soldiers, thousands of ships, thousands of aircraft, millions of tons of supplies. Everything depended on one single day. If the invasion failed, Europe could remain trapped under Nazi rule for years. If it succeeded, Hitler's empire would begin to crumble. But before history reached the beaches of Normandy, an extraordinary story unfolded in silence. Months before the invasion, Britain transformed into one enormous military camp. American soldiers crossed the Atlantic in endless convoys. Canadian divisions arrived by train. British troops completed relentless combat exercises. Fields became training grounds. Quiet villages became military bases. Roads filled with tanks, trucks, artillery, and armored vehicles. Every day brought another convoy. Every night brought another rehearsal. Every soldier understood one frightening truth: many of them would never return home. Thousands wrote letters to their families. Some asked their parents to stay strong. Others told their wives how much they loved them. Many fathers wrote to children they feared they would never see grow up. Some soldiers quietly placed photographs inside their helmets. Others carried small Bibles in their pockets. Many prayed, not because they were fearless, but because fear had become part of everyday life. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, Hitler believed he was ready. He called the coastline the Atlantic Wall. Stretching from Norway to France, thousands of bunkers, machine gun nests, artillery batteries, anti-tank obstacles, barbed wire, and hidden mines covered the beaches. German engineers flooded farmland to trap airborne troops. Concrete pillboxes overlooked every possible landing area. Massive coastal guns waited silently. Hitler believed no army could ever cross the channel. The enemy will be destroyed before setting foot on European soil, German commanders confidently declared. But the Allies had another weapon: deception. Operation Bodyguard became one of history's greatest military tricks. Fake tanks made from rubber, wooden airplanes, artificial landing craft, fake radio messages, entire imaginary armies. Everything pointed toward one location: Pas-de-Calais. German intelligence became convinced the invasion would happen there. Even German spies unknowingly spread false information prepared by Allied intelligence. Every fake transmission, every fake camp, every inflatable tank bought precious time. While Germany watched the wrong coastline, the real invasion force quietly gathered elsewhere. General Dwight D. Eisenhower carried the greatest responsibility. As supreme Allied commander, every decision rested on his shoulders. He knew the cost. Thousands could die in a single morning. Failure would delay liberation. Success would reshape history. Late at night, Eisenhower often walked alone. Witnesses later recalled how deeply the burden weighed upon him. He understood something few leaders ever face. He was preparing to send an entire generation into battle. General Bernard Montgomery finalized the ground assault. Naval commanders coordinated thousands of ships. Air commanders prepared relentless bombing missions. Paratrooper units rehearsed night jumps again and again. Engineers built floating harbors unlike anything ever attempted before. Every problem demanded an answer. Every detail mattered. Because even one mistake could doom the invasion. As spring turned toward summer, the weather became another enemy. The English Channel was unpredictable. Strong winds, heavy seas, low clouds. A single storm could scatter landing craft across the coast. Aircraft might never reach their targets. Paratroopers could land miles away from their objectives. Meteorologists worked day and night. Every forecast became a matter of life and death. Then came June. The original invasion date approached. But nature refused to cooperate. Violent storms crashed across the channel. Huge waves battered ships. Rain reduced visibility. Many commanders believed the operation must be postponed. The pressure became unbearable. Inside Southwick House, near Portsmouth, senior commanders gathered around enormous weather maps. Silence filled the room. Every eye turned toward one man. Meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg. Would the weather improve? Or would history wait? Stagg carefully studied every report. Then he delivered cautious hope. A brief break in the storm. Just enough. Perhaps only 24 hours. It wasn't perfect, but it was the only opportunity. Now the decision belonged to Eisenhower. The room waited. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, Eisenhower leaned forward. His voice remained calm. "We'll go." Those two simple words launched the greatest invasion in military history. Orders spread across Britain. Convoys started moving. Aircraft prepared for takeoff. Ships left their harbors. Thousands of engines roared to life. The invasion had begun. Yet even as the armada crossed the channel, many soldiers remained unaware of where they were headed. Only after boarding transports were sealed envelopes opened. Inside were the maps. Normandy, France. Some stared quietly. Others nodded without speaking. Many realized this could be their final sunrise. Military chaplains moved among the troops. Prayers echoed across crowded ships. Some men laughed to hide fear. Others sat alone in complete silence. One young American later wrote, "I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid I wouldn't do my duty." As darkness covered the channel, the largest fleet the world had ever seen sailed toward occupied Europe. More than 5,000 ships stretched across the sea. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, landing craft, hospital ships, supply vessels, fuel tankers. The ocean itself seemed alive. Above them, thousands of aircraft filled the skies. Bombers headed toward German defenses. Fighters protected the fleet. Transport planes carried airborne divisions. Gliders followed silently behind. Everything moved according to an unimaginably complex plan. Just after midnight, the first wave entered enemy territory. Thousands of American and British paratroopers prepared to jump into darkness. Many had never experienced combat. Heavy anti-aircraft fire suddenly exploded around the aircraft. Bright tracer rounds pierced the night sky. Pilots violently maneuvered. Formations scattered. Some transport planes flew too fast, others too low. Red and green lights flashed inside the cabins. The jump signal came. One by one, paratroopers disappeared into the darkness. Some landed exactly where planned. Many landed miles away. Others fell directly into flooded fields. Some drowned beneath the weight of their equipment. Others landed among German soldiers already searching the countryside. Confusion spread everywhere. Yet small groups immediately began fighting. They destroyed bridges, captured crossroads, cut communication lines, seized villages. Despite chaos, their courage prevented German reinforcements from reaching the beaches quickly. Back over the Channel, the invasion fleet approached Normandy. Far ahead, German coastal defenders looked out into the darkness. Most saw nothing. Then, one soldier noticed strange shapes on the horizon. Another reached for binoculars. Soon disbelief spread through every bunker. The sea was completely covered. Ships, hundreds, then thousands. As dawn slowly approached, the greatest invasion force ever assembled appeared before occupied France. History stood only minutes away. The world was about to witness the longest day. The first light of June 6, 1944, slowly crept across the English Channel. A cold grey dawn revealed a sight no human being had ever witnessed before. The horizon disappeared beneath thousands of ships. From every direction came the sound of roaring engines, crashing waves, and distant aircraft. The invasion had reached the shores of Normandy. For the young soldiers crowded inside the landing craft, the moment felt unreal. Some tightened the straps on their helmets. Some silently checked their rifles for the 10th time. Others reached into their pockets and touched family photographs one last time. No one spoke much anymore. Everyone understood what waited beyond the steel ramp. Death. Inside one landing craft, an officer looked at the faces of his men. Most were barely out of their teens. Some had never fired a weapon in combat. Yet within minutes, they would charge directly into one of the most heavily defended coastlines on Earth. As the boats drew closer, the naval bombardment began. Battleships unleashed enormous shells that screamed across the sky. Cruisers fired broadside after broadside. Destroyers moved dangerously close to shore, pouring shells into German bunkers. The ground shook for miles. Columns of smoke rose above the cliffs. For a brief moment, many soldiers believed the bombardment had destroyed the enemy defenses. They were wrong. Deep inside reinforced concrete bunkers, German troops waited patiently. Machine guns remained ready. Artillery crews stood at their positions. They had survived the bombardment, and now they watched the invasion fleet approach. At exactly 6:30 a.m., the first American landing craft headed toward Omaha Beach. The sea itself had become an enemy. Strong currents pushed boats off course. Many landing craft struck hidden sandbars. Some filled with water before reaching shore. Soldiers carrying over 70 pounds of equipment struggled to stay above the waves. Then, the ramps dropped. Instantly, machine gun fire ripped across the water. Bullets tore through the front ranks before many soldiers even stepped forward. Some fell inside the boats. Others disappeared beneath the waves. The peaceful sound of the ocean vanished beneath explosions, screaming, and relentless gunfire. The carefully rehearsed assault immediately descended into chaos. Engineers carrying explosives rushed toward obstacles planted in the surf. Their mission was to clear paths for the next waves. Many were killed before reaching their targets. Others continued despite devastating casualties. Every cleared obstacle came at an enormous cost. Across Omaha Beach, German machine guns fired from elevated cliffs. Their fields of fire crossed perfectly. Every step forward exposed another soldier. Landing craft continued arriving, wave after wave, each carrying fresh men directly into the storm. Some officers attempted to organize their units, but entire companies had become scattered. The invasion plan dissolved within minutes. Small groups formed naturally. Soldiers followed whoever was still standing. Rank no longer mattered. Survival became the only priority. Meanwhile, several miles away, the situation looked very different at Utah Beach. Strong currents had accidentally pushed American forces nearly a mile away from their intended landing zone. At first, commanders feared disaster, but fate had intervened. The unexpected landing placed them opposite weaker German defenses. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., despite walking with a cane and suffering from heart problems, calmly surveyed the coastline. Looking around, he smiled. "We'll start the war from right here." Without hesitation, he reorganized the attack. His calm leadership transformed what could have become confusion into one of the invasion's greatest successes. By afternoon, thousands of American troops had secured Utah Beach with relatively lighter losses. Back at Omaha, nothing came easily. Smoke covered the shoreline. Destroyed landing craft floated in the surf. Medical teams struggled to reach the wounded. Many medics ignored bullets flying around them. Again and again, they crossed open sand, carrying injured soldiers to whatever shelter they could find. Some gave their own lives while trying to save others. Naval destroyers recognized the crisis. Ignoring the danger of shallow waters, several captains ordered their ships closer than anyone believed possible. Their guns fired directly into German bunkers only hundreds of meters away. Massive explosions finally began silencing key defensive positions. That support gave trapped infantry their first real chance. Individual acts of courage now began changing history. A small group of Rangers climbed steep cliffs under constant fire. Another squad crawled through barbed wire, carrying Bangalore torpedoes. Engineers blasted openings. Infantry charged through. Step by step, meter by meter, the impossible slowly became possible. No grand strategy could be seen on the beach. Only exhausted men refusing to surrender. Each bunker captured opened another path inland. Each machine gun silenced saved countless lives. Each decision made by ordinary soldiers slowly shifted the battle. On the British and Canadian beaches, fierce fighting also unfolded. At Gold Beach, British troops battled fortified villages before pushing inland. At Juno Beach, Canadian soldiers faced heavy resistance but advanced farther than almost any other Allied force that day. At Sword Beach, British commandos raced towards strategic bridges while meeting determined German counterattacks. Every beach had its own battle. Every beach demanded sacrifice. Above Normandy, the skis never rested. Allied fighters hunted German aircraft. Transport planes returned with bullet holes covering their wings. Gliders crashed into fields, carrying artillery, jeeps, and reinforcements. Some landed perfectly. Others shattered on impact. Yet their cargo kept moving. German commanders struggled to understand the situation. Reports flooded headquarters from every direction. Paratroopers behind the lines. Massive naval bombardments. Multiple beach landings. Communication cables had been cut. Telephone lines were silent. Bridges had been destroyed. Confusion spread throughout the German command structure. Many officers still believed Normandy was only a diversion. They expected the real invasion somewhere else. Hours passed before the full truth became impossible to ignore. By then, the Allies already had thousands of soldiers ashore. Even Adolf Hitler remained asleep during the critical early hours. Several officers hesitated to wake him because only Hitler could authorize the release of important armored reserve divisions. Those lost hours proved enormously costly. Time, the Allies' most valuable weapon, continued slipping away from Germany. As afternoon approached, the battle remained uncertain. Omaha Beach still resembled a nightmare. Bodies covered the shoreline. Destroyed vehicles burned fiercely. Smoke drifted across the sand. But something remarkable had happened. The soldiers who survived the first deadly waves had reached the bluffs above the beach. Once on higher ground, they attacked German bunkers from unexpected directions. One strongpoint after another fell. Machine guns that had dominated the beaches finally fell silent. The Atlantic Wall, long believed to be unstoppable, had been broken, not by machines alone, not by overwhelming firepower alone, but by ordinary men who refused to stop moving forward. As evening approached, Allied flags slowly appeared across sections of Normandy. The beachheads remained fragile. German forces were preparing powerful counterattacks. The battle for France had only just begun. But one fact could no longer be denied. The impossible invasion had succeeded. The gates of Fortress Europe had finally been opened. As darkness settled over Normandy on June 6, 1944, the beaches were finally in Allied hands. But no one celebrated. The battle had only entered its next phase. The sand was littered with shattered landing craft, abandoned weapons, torn uniforms, and countless fallen soldiers who would never leave France. Medics worked without rest. Makeshift hospitals sprang up behind the beaches. Doctors performed surgery on wooden tables. There was little anesthesia. Bandages quickly ran out. Many wounded men quietly asked only one question. Did we make it? The answer was always the same. Yes, we're in France. For many, those words brought comfort before they closed their eyes forever. Farther inland, German commanders scrambled to organize a counterattack. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the brilliant commander responsible for defending Normandy, was not even at headquarters when the invasion began. Believing bad weather made an invasion impossible, he had returned to Germany to visit his wife on her birthday. When the news reached him, he immediately rushed back. But precious hours had already been lost. Those hours would change history. Meanwhile, thousands of Allied engineers began one of the greatest logistical operations ever attempted. Landing soldiers was only the beginning. They now had to land tanks, drugs, fuel, food, ammunition, medical supplies, and millions of gallons of gasoline. Without supplies, the invasion would collapse within days. Huge bulldozers pushed wrecked vehicles aside. Engineers cleared mines. Roads were repaired. Temporary bridges appeared almost overnight. The beaches became enormous supply ports. Every hour, hundreds of new landing craft arrived carrying reinforcements. The invasion never stopped moving. One remarkable invention soon proved its worth. The Allies had secretly built massive artificial harbors known as mulberries. Gigantic floating concrete sections were towed across the English Channel. Together, they formed temporary ports where ships could unload directly onto French soil. It was an engineering miracle. Within days, thousands of tons of supplies flowed into Normandy. Hitler had expected the Allies to capture an existing port. Instead, they brought their own. The German army refused to surrender. Elite panzer divisions rushed toward Normandy. Heavy Tiger and Panther tanks rolled through narrow French roads. Their objective was simple: push the Allies back into the sea. If they reached the beaches before Allied forces strengthened their defenses, Operation Overlord could still fail. But the Allies controlled the skies. Every road became dangerous for German vehicles. Fighter bombers constantly searched for moving columns. Whenever tanks appeared, aircraft attacked. Bridges exploded. Fuel trucks burned. Entire convoys disappeared beneath clouds of smoke. German reinforcements arrived slowly, often in small groups instead of one powerful force. That delay gave the Allies exactly what they needed: time. The countryside of Normandy became a deadly maze. Tall hedgerows divided every field. Behind every hedge, a machine gun could be waiting. A sniper, an anti-tank gun. German defenders knew every road, every village, every hidden path. Progress slowed dramatically. Sometimes an entire day of fighting gained only a few hundred yards. Every farmhouse became a fortress. Every crossroads became a battlefield. American soldiers soon learned that the enemy rarely fought in the open. German troops fired, then disappeared behind thick hedges. The next attack came from another direction. It was frustrating, exhausting, terrifying. One veteran later recalled, "You never saw the battlefield, only the next hedge." In the British sector, fierce battles erupted around the city of Caen. Capturing Caen had been one of the first-day objectives. Instead, it became one of the longest battles of the Normandy campaign. German armored divisions defended every street with determination. Bombs reduced entire neighborhoods to rubble. Civilians hid in basements as fighting consumed their city. Many families who had survived years of occupation suddenly found themselves trapped between two powerful armies. Freedom came, but at a heartbreaking cost. Across the front, acts of extraordinary courage happened every hour. A radio operator continued transmitting while seriously wounded. A tank commander rescued trapped infantry under heavy fire. Combat engineers crawled across minefields to clear safe paths. Military chaplains ignored bullets to comfort dying soldiers. Many received medals. Many never lived to know they had earned them. Back in Britain, families gathered around radios. News bulletins interrupted regular broadcasts. People waited anxiously. No one knew whether sons, brothers, husbands, or fathers were still alive. Churches filled with silent prayers. Factory workers paused to hear the latest reports. Across occupied Europe, secret resistance groups listened in hiding. When they learned the Allies had landed successfully, hope spread like wildfire. Perhaps liberation was finally coming. Inside Hitler's headquarters, anger replaced confidence. He had promised that Fortress Europe could never be invaded. Now enemy armies were advancing across France. Orders became increasingly unrealistic. Counterattack immediately. Retake the beaches. Drive the Allies into the sea. But reality ignored those commands. The Allies kept growing stronger. Every hour brought thousands more soldiers, hundreds more vehicles, mountains of supplies. The beachhead expanded steadily. On June 7, then June 8, then June 9. The fighting never stopped. Rain mixed with smoke. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Artillery thundered day and night. Sleep became a luxury few soldiers enjoyed. Many survived on cold rations and a few hours of rest inside muddy foxholes. Yet morale remained remarkably strong. Everyone understood the importance of their mission. Failure was no longer an option. Every mile gained brought Europe closer to freedom. The Atlantic Wall, once described as impenetrable, had failed, not because it lacked weapons, not because its soldiers lacked courage. It failed because determination, planning, sacrifice, and overwhelming cooperation proved stronger than concrete and steel. The invasion that Hitler believed impossible had become reality. But an even greater challenge still lay ahead. Normandy was only the doorway. Beyond it waited Paris, Belgium, the Netherlands, and finally, Germany itself. The road to Berlin had begun. By the middle of June 1944, the beaches of Normandy no longer resembled the terrifying battlefield they had been on D-Day. The smoke had begun to clear. The endless waves that had carried thousands of young soldiers across the English Channel now carried something just as important: hope. Every sunrise brought more ships. Every tide delivered fresh reinforcements. Tanks rolled off, landing craft one after another. Truck convoys stretched farther than the eye could see. Bulldozers cleared destroyed vehicles from the beaches. Engineers repaired roads almost as quickly as German bombs could destroy them. The invasion had survived its most dangerous hours. Now it had to survive the weeks ahead. No commander underestimated what still lay before them. Normandy was only the first step. The real battle for Europe had just begun. Across the countryside, Allied soldiers advanced through a landscape unlike anything they had trained for. The fields of Normandy were divided by centuries-old hedgerows, thick walls of earth covered in tangled bushes and trees. These natural barriers created a deadly maze. German soldiers hid behind every hedge. Machine guns waited behind every opening. Mortars were already aimed at every crossroads. An American soldier later described it perfectly. You could hear the enemy before you ever saw him, and sometimes you never saw him at all. Every 100 yards became a battle. Every farm became a fortress. Every village became another obstacle on the road to freedom. Sleep became almost impossible. Rain-soaked uniforms day after day. Foxholes filled with muddy water. Food was often cold. Letters from home arrived late, if they arrived at all. Many soldiers carried photographs that had become worn from being unfolded every night. Pictures of wives, parents, children, sweethearts. Those tiny photographs reminded them what they were fighting for. Freedom wasn't just an idea anymore. It had faces. The German army remained dangerous. Although shocked by the success of D-Day, its soldiers continued to resist with determination. Panzer divisions launched fierce counterattacks. Tiger tanks emerged from forests without warning. Artillery shells exploded across open fields. Snipers hid inside church towers and ruined buildings. Every Allied advance came at a terrible cost. Some companies entered battle with 200 men. By evening, only 80 remained. Yet replacements kept arriving. The invasion never stopped moving forward. High above Normandy, the skies belonged almost entirely to the Allies. Thousands of aircraft flew missions every single day. Fighters hunted German vehicles. Bombers attacked railroads. Reconnaissance planes photographed enemy movements. Whenever German reinforcements attempted to move during daylight, they were spotted, then attacked. Fuel trucks erupted into flames. Railway bridges collapsed. Entire convoys disappeared beneath clouds of smoke and dust. German commanders soon realized they could barely move their armies during the day. The Allied air campaign had become one of the invasion's greatest weapons. General Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the front whenever possible. He spoke with ordinary soldiers. He listened more than he talked. He understood something many commanders never forgot. Every decision made at headquarters eventually reached a young soldier carrying a rifle. Maps showed arrows. Reality showed sacrifice. Every mile gained represented hundreds of lives forever changed. Weeks of brutal fighting slowly weakened German defenses. Then came the operation that would finally break the deadlock. Operation Cobra. On July 25, 1944, more than 3,000 Allied bombers appeared over Normandy. The roar of their engines filled the sky. For hours, explosions shook the earth. Entire sections of the German defensive line disappeared beneath smoke and fire. When the bombing finally stopped, American infantry and armored divisions attacked. This time, the German line broke. After weeks of exhausting hedgerow fighting, the Allies finally reached open country. Tanks accelerated across fields. Mechanized columns raced forward. The war suddenly became mobile once again. German commanders struggled desperately to establish new defensive positions. But the momentum had shifted forever. As Allied armies surged across France, Hitler refused to accept reality. Inside his headquarters, he issued impossible orders. Hold every position. Retreat is forbidden. Counterattack immediately. But his generals knew the truth. Many divisions no longer existed. Fuel was nearly gone. Communication had collapsed. Air support was almost non-existent. Germany was fighting with determination, but no longer with the resources needed to win. In August came one of the greatest disasters ever suffered by the German army. The Falaise Pocket. American forces advanced from the south. British and Canadian troops attacked from the north. Together, they slowly surrounded thousands of German soldiers. The escape routes narrowed every hour. Roads became clogged with tanks, trucks, horse-drawn wagons, artillery, and desperate soldiers trying to flee. Allied aircraft circled overhead. Whenever movement appeared, bombs followed. The roads became graveyards of destroyed vehicles. Burning tanks illuminated the night. Abandoned equipment stretched for miles. Some German units escaped. Many did not. The destruction inside the Falaise Pocket shattered Germany's remaining strength in France. Historians would later describe it as one of the decisive defeats of the entire war. Now nothing stood between the Allies and Paris. Inside the French capital, resistance fighters had already begun their own uprising. For years, they had operated in secret. They sabotaged railways, collected intelligence, printed underground newspapers, risked execution every single day. Now they emerged openly. French flags appeared from hidden drawers. Barricades rose across city streets. Citizens who had endured 4 years of occupation refused to wait any longer. They wanted their city back. On August 25, 1944, Allied forces entered Paris. Church bells rang across the city. Crowds poured into the streets. Flowers covered military vehicles. Children climbed onto Allied tanks. Old men cried openly. Women embraced soldiers they had never met. For many Parisians, it felt as though time itself had begun moving again. Occupation was over. Freedom had returned. Photographs taken that day became symbols recognized around the world. But behind every smiling face stood years of suffering. Years of fear. Years of loss. The liberation of Paris was not simply a military victory. It was the return of hope. News of Paris spread rapidly across the globe. In London, people celebrated in Trafalgar Square. In New York, newspapers printed enormous headlines. Across occupied Europe, resistance groups realized Germany could be defeated. Even in nations still under Nazi control, hope grew stronger. The impossible was becoming reality. Yet the war was not over. Far ahead lay Belgium, the Netherlands, the Rhine River, and finally, Germany itself. Every Allied soldier knew more battles awaited them. More friends would be lost. More sacrifices would be demanded. But one thing had changed forever. Victory no longer seemed impossible. It now seemed inevitable. For Adolf Hitler, D-Day became the turning point from which there was no recovery. His dream of Fortress Europe had failed. The Atlantic Wall had failed. His elite armies were retreating. Within months, Allied forces pressed from the west, while Soviet armies advanced relentlessly from the east. Germany found itself trapped between two enormous fronts. On April 30, 1945, Hitler died in his bunker in Berlin. Only days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. Looking back, historians agreed on one undeniable truth. The road to Berlin began on the beaches of Normandy. The price of that road was staggering. Thousands of Allied soldiers were killed on D-Day alone. Thousands more were wounded. German casualties were also immense. French civilians suffered terribly as villages became battlefields. Entire communities disappeared beneath artillery fire. Behind every cross, in every cemetery, lies a story. A young man who would never become a father. A husband who would never return home. A son whose parents waited for letters that would never come. War records victories. Families remember names. Today, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword are peaceful beaches. Tourists walk where bullets once flew. Children build sandcastles where landing craft once exploded. The waves continue to reach the shore exactly as they did on June 6, 1944. Nature moved on. History did not. Rows of white crosses stand silently in Normandy's cemeteries. Each one reminds us that freedom has never been free. It has always required extraordinary courage from ordinary people. D-Day was not merely the largest amphibious invasion in history. It was proof that unity can overcome tyranny, that planning can defeat arrogance, that courage can overcome fear, and that hope can survive even the darkest moments of human history. More than 80 years have passed. The soldiers who stormed those beaches are becoming fewer with each passing year. But their legacy remains. Every generation inherits the responsibility to remember what they did. Not because they sought glory, not because they desired war, but because they believed future generations deserved to live in peace. As long as the waves continue to wash the shores of Normandy, as long as the white crosses stand beneath the French sky, as long as history is remembered, the courage of D-Day will never be forgotten.